Hi, Center School Biology. This is Miss Peterson back again. So congratulations on getting done with your excellent osmosis lab. You are going to or have started working on your models to make sense of how substances move across a plasma membrane. But in order to do that, we need to have a little bit of vocabulary. So let's get started. The first vocabulary term that I want us to think about is this idea of solute. It's pretty key to understanding diffusion and osmosis. So a solute is really anything that is dissolved in a solvent to produce a solution. So if I look over here at this picture, I see some blue stuff right there. That right there is going to be the solute. Right here, I have the solvent, and in this case, the solvent is water. And if I mix those two together, I end up with this solution right here. So a solute can actually be a liquid or a solid or a gas, but for the sake of this class, most of the solutes that we're going to be talking about are solid in nature or dissolved in nature in a solvent. The term concentration is heavily linked to this idea of solute. So concentration refers to the ratio of solute to the total solution. So if I look at these two beakers right here, I see that these two beakers contain about the same amount of solution, but the amount of solute inside of them is very different. So over on the left, if I look over here, I will see that there's lots and lots of solute in that solution. It's very dense and the particles are not very far apart. So when that is true, I would say that this solution has a high concentration of solutes. That is, the ratio of solute to solution is pretty high. If I look over on the right, I see that there are many fewer bits of solute in that solution, and so therefore I would say that it has a low concentration of solutes. Notice that the solutes are far apart and there aren't very many of them in the same amount. So over on the left there's a high concentration, and over on the right there's a low concentration. So what would happen if I were to walk in the room and throw down a bottle of Axe body spray in the corner of the room? Would you all go running out of the room, or just a few of you? What would happen? Well, before you go running out of the room, you would see that in fact the Axe body spray would start to move around the room in a random fashion until finally it was spread all the way throughout. So if we think about it, it moves from an area of high concentration, where that little video started, and moves to areas of low concentration until the whole thing is really equal. So they move from an area of high concentration again to an area of low concentration. That's called diffusion. Diffusion is the natural movement of particles from those areas of high concentration to the areas of low concentration. And they will keep moving until the particles are spread out, and there's generally an equal concentration of particles throughout the space, and that's what we call equilibrium. So at that point the particles are still moving, but at that point the concentration is pretty even throughout. Eventually everyone in the room will smell the spray, and then we'll all leave the room. So that's diffusion in a room, but how do substances diffuse across a plasma membrane? Well, it's exactly the same. So the particles will move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration until equilibrium is reached on both sides. But that's only if the particles can move through the membrane. And we talked about this in class briefly, but let's review it again. So the only things that really can move across a cell membrane easily are very small particles that don't have a charge on them, don't have a plus or minus by them. So oxygen, O2, can easily move across a membrane all by itself. CO2 can easily move across a membrane all by itself, assuming that it's moving from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. Nitrogen can also, although nitrogen usually doesn't, because cells don't need nitrogen. So those are the main things. Now remember that water needs a special protein channel. It needs its own little special ditch to move across the cell membrane but it can also move passively across that membrane. Sometimes particles cannot move across a membrane. So let's think about what those are. So really large particles like carbohydrates cannot move across a membrane. Proteins cannot move across a membrane, and fats cannot move across a membrane. So proteins and fats. Okay, and then there are other things which are charged, such as sodium, which has a positive charge on it, or chloride, which has a negative charge on it, also cannot move across a membrane. So what happens in those cases? Well, all of those substances are going to stay where they are, and in that case, only the water can move. And this is a very special case of diffusion. So the special case of water moving across a membrane is called osmosis. And just like the solutes, if the water can move, it's going to move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So if we think about it, where is the concentration of water the highest in this picture? Well, if I have two circles of about equal size, I will see that there are way more water molecules over on the left-hand side in that space than there are water molecules in that same space on the right-hand side. So I would say that there is, in fact, let me pick out a different color, that there is a high concentration of water over on the left-hand side, and that there's a lower concentration of water on the right-hand side. And remember that water will diffuse, all substances diffuse from an area of high concentration to low concentration, so water will move in this direction until equilibrium has been reached. So there's another bit of language that we use that just is on top of this. So if you remember, we had pictures where there were areas of higher concentration of solutes and areas of lower concentration of solutes, and we use another term to mean the same thing. So one of the ones that we use is this idea of hypotonic. So the term hypo means too little. If you think about it, you've probably heard the term hypothermia. And hypothermia is when you are not warm enough or you have too little heat. So hypo means too little or not enough. A hypotonic solution has fewer solutes than inside the cell. So over here, I have a hypotonic solution. Hyper means more, and this makes sense. We've heard the term hyperactive. Someone who is hyperactive is too active or more active. That means that a hypertonic solution will actually have more solutes in it. So it has a high concentration of solutes. However, we can talk about a solution being hypotonic or hypertonic, or we can talk about a cell being hypertonic or hypotonic. So where the solution is hypertonic, that means that the cell itself is hypotonic. So if I have a hypertonic solution, I have a hypotonic cell. And over on the left-hand side, if I have a hypotonic solution, then I have a hypertonic cell. So let's think about this again. Which way does water move using all of this information that we have? So over on the left, I have lots of water molecules, and I have less concentration of solutes. Over on the right, I have a higher concentration of solutes, but less water. So I would say that the left side is hypotonic. It has a high concentration of water and a low concentration of solutes, therefore it's hypotonic. And over on the right-hand side, I see a low concentration of water and a high concentration of solutes, and therefore it is hypertonic. So which way will water move again? Well, water moves from an area of hypotonic to an area of hypertonic, or an area of high water to an area of low water concentration. And they will do that until both sides are isotonic. Isotonic means basically the same thing as equilibrium, that the ratio of solutes to solution is approximately the same. So what would happen if I put a red blood cell into pure water? Well, let's think about this. Would the solution have a high water concentration or a low water concentration? Well, the solution is water, so it would have a very high water concentration. So in fact, that water would be transported into the cell. And because there's no cell wall in a red blood cell, it would keep moving into the cell until the cell burst. Now there's something to consider. All right, biology, thanks for listening. Stay curious.